Hello, everybody. I am Amy, your tour guide for tonight's episode of Murderous, Mysterious, and Macabre. And tonight I'll be telling my co-hosts, Amber and Joe, about the murder of Bob Crane.
Not Ichabod Crane, just Bob.
Yeah.
Crane.
Not Ichabod, just Bob. Robert, otherwise known as Bob Crane. Okay, reminder. Reminder, you can find content warnings for this episode in the description below. Does that name ring a bell to either one of you? First off, like right off the bat, have you ever heard of that name before?
Literally just the same reference Joe made, which is anytime anybody says Crane, I think of Ichabod Crane.
Okay.
Sleepy Hollow, and that's it.
I'm curious. I mean, maybe as I start talking about this, something will ring, but I don't know. It might not. I will tell you that it is before my time even. So probably not, but some things may sound familiar to you. Let's just go there.
Okay. Let's go.
And I do want to mention, as I always do, what if you have any further interest in this, some of the resources you can check out. There are some books about this topic. The most famous of which is called The Murder of Bob Crane by Robert Graysmith. There's also a book called Who Killed Bob Crane by John Hook. That name you might know. He's a newscaster here in Phoenix, Arizona. He used to do Hook and Lake show on the news.
Doesn't ring
John
a bell.
Hook? No, nothing? All right. Well, he wrote a book about this murder. And then there is a famous movie from 2002 called Autofocus. So if anybody's interested, there you have it. So, early life of Mr. Bob Crane. This gentleman was born July 13th, 1928. So again, well before even my time. He was born in Waterbury, Connecticut, to Alfred and Rosemary Crane. He had an older brother named Alfred as well, and they grew up in Stamford, Connecticut. So nice little small town, East Coast-ish upbringing for this gentleman. He was known as a class clown. Very, very popular guy. Also an avid musician. He started learning the drums at about 10 or 11 after hearing a gentleman by the name of Gene Krupa. I probably butchered his name, but I'm going to say it as Krupa. Krupa. He's some legendary drummer, jazz musician, composer that was at the New York World's Fair. And our friend Bob Crane saw him and was awestruck and inspired and decided to take up the drums at a very, very young age. And he was very musically inclined. So he would teach his friends to play drums so they could join like local parades. They could do like a marching section in local parades. He formed and joined a lot of bands throughout school. He was in a big jazz band in high school. He played with like a local orchestra when he was in high school. So he was quite talented. He was a very good musician, apparently.
Okay. I don't think I've ever heard of Krupa. I don't know.
No, me neither.
I like jazz music. I'm not super, super well versed in jazz music. So I will say that. Like, I'll definitely look him up. But so far, not a single name has rung a bell in this story.
Nope.
Yeah. So I'm just going to say he's a white guy. Krupa, I didn't know the name either, but, I read up about him a little bit, and apparently like he is considered one of the most influential drummers. Like he just changed the way drumming was considered in the music industry. So before it was just a very low key background. It didn't really take center stage in any music, but he was apparently a really talented drummer and laid a drum track down for some song that became absolutely famous. And kind of the drums were center stage on that song. And so he kind of like nudged drumming into like a whole different realm than it had been before that. And
Nice.
this is who
Okay,
inspired
cool.
our friend Bob Crane. So pretty cool. When he graduated high school in 1946, from Stamford, where he grew up, he enlisted in the National Guard for 2 years, 1948 to 1950. But prior to that, he had started to send out audition tapes to a bunch of radio stations along the East Coast. His love of music he decided he wanted some type of future in radio. He wanted something to do with music, and didn't necessarily just want to play in a band. So he was very, very interested in being on the radio, producing for the radio, things like that. So he started sending out audition tapes like as soon as he graduated high school. He also took a course in station operation at the University of Bridgeport of Connecticut. So very interested, furthered his schooling to go down that path, and was very serious about it. However, he heard nothing back, so he enlisted in the National Guard for 2 years. And when he got out in 1950, he actually got his first shot in radio. He was hired to a station called WLEA in a small town in New York. They gave him his first shot, and then he quickly moved back to Connecticut to stay in radio. But he did stints in Bristol, Connecticut, and eventually went back to Bridgeport, where he grew up. He married his high school sweetheart in 1949. Her name was Anne Terzian, and they had 3 lovely little children, Robert, Deborah, and Karen. So
Of course,
you
one is
ladies,
named after him.
of course, Robert
Always.
and Deb and Karen. These are like very much 1940s, 1950s names, right?
Yes.
Yes. But you guys can open up your pictures now. Look at the first picture, because this is a picture of our friend
Oh, wow.
and his lovely family.
Oh,
That's so funny.
I gotta tell you,
like,
the wife's outfit for some reason with like the little sort of mock turtleneck thing going on and the blue over it. Immediately, I thought Star Trek.
Yeah.
that's funny.
Immediately.
It's definitely for those of you listening at home. It's very much, we got some very synthetic materials going on, very 1950s, early 60s kind of vibes in the clothing and the way this family looks. But nonetheless,
got the hairstyle of the nurse in the original Star Trek.
Yes.
Good.
Very
gracious.
wholesome looking family, though. Very
true.
Cute, wholesome looking family. So yeah, they even the children were raised early in Connecticut, and from all accounts, just a lovely, happy little family. Later on in 1956, as a matter of fact, they moved to LA. He was poached as a radio host for a CBS radio station in LA called KNX. Apparently he was so good that he was poached not only to build up the listenership in LA, but being in Connecticut, he was good enough that he was actually drawing the listeners away from CBS's New York station.
Wow.
So they doubled up, and they got him for their own listeners to listen to a CBS station, and to stop poaching the listeners from their other radio station. So He was apparently really, really good at what he did. He was just a very fun, approachable, interesting guy. While he was in LA, he actually became a really incredibly popular interviewer. So like, he was just really personable. He knew a lot he would like research the people that he interviewed. People who were quite famous actually loved to be interviewed by him. They would like he was the guy in LA to be interviewed by. So he interviewed like Marilyn Monroe, Bob Hope, Frank Sinatra. Like they all, when they had projects or things coming up, they would go get interviewed by him on the radio because he was really, really quite good. And he had a really big listenership. I don't even know how to say that.
Something
yeah,
like
because
that.
it wouldn't be viewership. It would be like
It's like what do you call that? People. The people just loved him. They loved him.
Yes, everybody loved him. Everybody liked his voice. I want to hear like a voice recording of this guy. Like I'm just trying to. I'm trying to picture what it is that would draw that many people, and then like I want to hear it. It's got to be
and I did read that like at the time, think of like Casey Kasem's voice, right? It's like very low and kind of like mellow, and that was the thing at the time. But he actually, from what I read, it was a little higher pitched and a little more like frenetic. He just had like a lot of, I don't want to say anxious, but energy, just like a lot of energy. Yeah. And I think that that's what actually made him so popular, is it just kind of like fed off of other people's energy and excitement. And so he was just very different. Like he was a completely different feel than all the other famous radio hosts and DJs at the time.
Okay, so just your description of him and like how popular he was, it made me think of another person. Have you guys ever watched? It's a show on YouTube called Hot Ones.
I don't think so.
Oh, first of all,
I haven't. I've heard of it.
It's so good. So I'm posting on our sharing Discord. That's the host, Sean Evans, and just the way you described this guy. Like, I really want to know, because, like...
the hot wings?
Yes, it gives Sean Evans...
Oh, okay, yes.
Where he is also very, like... Yes, so the premise is, like, he eats hot wings with, like, celebrities and does interviews, but he's, like, generally regarded as, like, a really, really good interviewer. Like, some pretty surprisingly famous people, like, go on this, like, YouTube channel to do interviews with him. It's kind of the same thing, like, very personable, kind of very high energy, but, like, very, like, down to earth at the same time, so... Yeah. Going purely off of nothing, like having never heard the content of any of his ads, like just the way you described him, I don't know why it like tickled a thought in my brain where I'm like, this feels like the same vibe of show, where it's just like somebody who's like just like got this like weird energy, this like wild energy that people are just like want to be a part of.
Yeah, well, I mean, he was definitely very, like, he was on the radio for almost 10 years in LA. So, I mean, it was like a well-established, we'll hear more about it in a little bit, but he only stopped because he got more famous, not because, like, somebody knocked him off his perch as, like, the guy in LA. But as a matter of fact, he was so good at his job, and he was so well-liked by the people who he interviewed, that he started getting like little guest appearances on things. So he filled in as a host for Johnny Carson at one point on some show. It wasn't the Tonight Show, but it was some show that he hosted. And that led to some appearances on The Twilight Zone, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, and The Dick Van Dyke Show, among many others, which were the biggest shows of their time, let's be honest.
I have to have seen him somewhere then before, because I've watched literally all of the Twilight Zone.
Yeah,
all of it.
Have the box set. Like, I need to know what episode this man was on.
I know. Well, from what I hear, what I read, the Twilight Zone appearance, he is uncredited for, because it was literally like the first thing he did.
He was a radio announcer in it.
Yes. So yeah, he just like did it as like a favor, like popped on, did it, and it just led to like more and more and more things.
Oh my god!
So yeah,
so cool.
Yeah, he was really good at radio announcing. Apparently, like I would like to hear his voice too. I'm gonna have to
rewatch that Twilight Zone episode just so I can hear this guy's voice and like try to place it and be like, oh, I know who that is.
I've heard this guy.
I know all about Bob Crane, don't you worry.
Let me tell you his story.
Let me tell you about Bob Crane, actually.
Just from that one Twilight Zone episode.
Just from that one Twilight
Zone. I know all about him. All about him.
I'll know everything I need to know.
So his little stint on the Dick Van Dyke Show caught the attention of an actress named Donna Reed. You guys probably don't know who she is either, but she had quite a big show at the time. And she asked him to come in and do like a guest appearance on the Donna Reed Show. So he did. And he was so impressive at this character that he played that they actually decided to make him a regular on her show.
Holy crap.
So from
Nice.
1963 to 1964, he was a regular cast member on the Donna Reed Show. So yeah, he turned a one small like guest appearance stint into like a year-long job on one of the biggest shows on TV at the time.
That's crazy.
But he loved the radio, so he continued working full time at his radio station gig the entire year he was working on that show. So he was a busy guy. He was like bouncing back and forth between studios and keeping a lot of stuff going at the time. But loved it. Apparently, he loved being in the radio, and he discovered that he loved acting. Who knew? He was really good at yet another thing. One of those multi-hyphenate, multi-talented people that make me jealous.
Yeah.
I can't do any of those things, and he can apparently do them all. So yeah, he was just a really likable, good guy, I guess. When his job at the Donna Reed Show ended, he was approached by Hollywood to become for a show that they were developing to be in the starring role. He would have had his own show. And maybe this is where you'll recognize something, maybe not. That show was called Hogan's Heroes. Have you ever heard of it?
Oh, yeah.
Amber's dad has mentioned it. He used to watch it as a very small child with his father or his grandfather. I can't remember who. Kind of a bizarre premise for a sitcom. It ran from 1965 to 1971, and it was a comedy depicting kind of bumbling Nazi soldiers guarding an Allied prisoner of war camp. So it was just a couple years after the war ended, they started this show, and I mean, laugh track and all, about prisoner of war camp and these inept Nazis watching them, essentially.
All right.
I can say I've never seen it. I have no idea if it was good or not, but it was a really, really popular show. It ran for like 6 years. And he was
Nazis.
Yeah. He was actually nominated for an Emmy in 1966 and 1967 for this show. So
wow.
Apparently it was a good show.
It was super popular. Like I just saying this, I'm just like, I don't know. Like, obviously the show would never get made today, right? I mean, it just.
I don't know. We have Jojo Rabbit, so like, I think there's still a market. Out there
true.
For that.
That's true. But yeah, I just such an odd concept. Like, I don't even know how they sold this, but yeah, it was super popular. It did end in 1971, and at that point, he kind of had trouble finding work. He was older. He was, just sitcoms. He did some movies, but just teeny tiny parts in them. So he was never like a actor. Yeah, he was never like a full-blown movie star. So you hear about, and unfortunately, a lot of people that do sitcoms that's kind of when their sitcom ends.
They get typecast and then nobody else wants them for anything. But they were so into this one comedy show that you couldn't imagine them being in anything else. Yeah.
Look at like so that's kind of The Office and stuff like that today. Even like you see them in like commercials, but like it seems like it's really hard. Like you get one or two breakout people, but everyone else is kind of just like little roles in other sitcoms or commercials, and that's kind of it.
Yeah, so I mean, it seems unfortunate, but he apparently struggled when this show ended, to the point where he actually bought the rights to a play that he liked called Beginner's Luck. Never heard of it. And he toured dinner theaters and acted as both the star and director. So all over the country, like Florida, California, and sunny Arizona.
And that's where Arizona comes in.
This is how he ended up in our state.
How did he get to Arizona?
I know. I was slowly reeling you guys in. Like, how does this tie into Arizona? I'm giving you a little foreshadowing. He's a little bit washed up at this point, doing dinner theater, ends up in, where did I say? Scottsdale, Arizona. Not just Arizona. No. It's a dinner theater in Scottsdale, Arizona.
I mean,
well,
I guess it's probably the best place to do dinner theater in Arizona in like the 70s.
Yeah. Oh, and I did forget to say, you can scroll to picture number 2. This is him, peak Hogan's Hero. So sorry.
Oh, sweet.
So sorry.
Oh my goodness.
See, now I recognize this picture.
Yes, exactly. I'm like, I feel like you've seen or heard of it. You just don't know how or where. It's one of those type of things.
It is like, that is admittedly like such an odd premise. Like, but hey.
Like, I think, and I read of all the like background that I was reading about him, like he was handed the script or something like this, and he was like, I'm not right for this part. Like, why are you giving this to me? And the agent was like, oh, no, sweetie. It's a comedy. It's not like, he thought it was like a serious, like, prisoner of war camp show.
He's like,
and the guy's like, oh, no, it's going to be funny. People are going to be laughing with you. And he's like, what? But it worked. Apparently it worked.
All right.
So, I mean, I'm guessing, I haven't seen it, but he must have been quite likable to pull off this premise, is my guess.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I'm saying. Because it's an odd one, for sure.
It's an odd one, yeah.
So now we're going to get a little bit into his personal life, and the washed up part that I just talked about is a little bit of foreshadowing for, it wasn't just because of his show going off the air. So let's start there. Let's just say that. Any guesses anywhere?
Alcoholism, cocaine, heroin. He was in LA. He was a star, and it's the 50s and 60s. That kind of feels like that kind of vibe. Yeah.
Amber, you agree, or you have a different guess?
No, I think it's got to be the same thing. Like it's got to have been like either drinking or drugs of some kind. He had a little bit washed up. He doesn't seem like I don't know. Doesn't seem like a crazy, wild, like millions of dollars in debt kind of guy. So
yeah,
like partying a little too hardy.
Well, interestingly enough, he actually never drank or did drugs at all. He was super didn't want anything to do with them.
Boy Scout.
His drug of choice were
Girl Scout, Boy Scout.
I almost and then I was like, no, it couldn't be.
Yes. So
his drug
he
of
was
choice for women. Great.
That's he was a known philanderer. Big time. So you saw the picture of his lovely family. He had an affair with an actress on Hogan's Heroes. Her name was Cynthia Lynn. She played a character named Helga, which was like a secretary of the Nazis in the camp or something like that. Had a very torrid affair with her.
Wow.
And I think something happened. Her character got written off the show or something like that. And you have to bring in a replacement secretary. And he literally replaced her. Yeah. Replaced her with the next one. Who played a character named Hilda, which was a similar character, like the secretary for the Nazis or something.
I mean, if you're gonna make philandering your hobby, essentially, might as well go with an easy choice, right there, someone you work with. You don't have to go trolling the streets for somebody. It's a little safer.
Plus,
And I mean,
couple seasons, like you're gonna get a new shot.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah.
I can only imagine. I'm sure they were striking women, being typecast for this part they were picked for. I'm sure they were blonde hair, blue-eyed, beautiful women. So
probably 20 years old.
Yeah, if that's your weakness and it's there in front of you day after day, things are bound to happen. His second affair that he had with the one who played Hilda, her name was Patricia Olson. She used a screen name of, I don't know why you replaced Patricia Olson, which is a perfectly good name, but the screen name she chose was Sigrid Valdis.
I mean,
don't even know where that one came from.
Right.
It's striking.
Yeah.
That's about all I got.
I know there used to be a thing where it was like these little production companies, when they signed you on, like your names all had to be different enough.
Yeah, they would change your names.
They would change your name, and they'd be like, I like this name, and like that's what you would get sometimes. I don't know when that ended, so I don't know if like that's what happened, or if she was just like, I need a cooler name. I
mean, I don't think they force people to do it anymore, but people do still take essentially 60s, stage 70s, names.
Yeah.
It could be a gray area.
Yeah, well, I think it's related to the Screen Actors Guild. So if you want to be a part of the Screen Actors Guild, you cannot duplicate names. So
you have to pick something that's not all.
Yeah, especially if you have a common name, like somebody in the guild, and it not even current names, like it can never have been used or something like that. So yeah, if you have a pretty common name, you're kind of shoehorned into, I got to find something else to call myself. And she just went,
fucked.
Yeah, she just went like balls to the wall, as crazy of a name as she could think of. I feel like she was just like, well, if I'm changing it, I'm changing it. Like, I mean it.
That's funny. Have you guys ever thought about that? Like, if you guys had to pick like just wild out there screen name, what would you pick?
I mean, no, because I've Googled myself and I'm the only one in existence, or that has been in existence as far as records can find. I don't have to change shit.
Oh, lucky you.
That's pretty good. I got a super common name, so
yeah, I know.
You would have thought about it. I don't think I've ever thought about it. Although my dear friend Rhonda, when she used to make fun of me, said that my spy name should be Pussy Galore. So
I love it.
Yeah.
I
think it's from a James Bond film.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, 100% it is. I'd be careful about that one in the Actors Guild. You would be typecast for some very specific roles.
So yeah, I'm not going to choose that one, but that's the one that she swore up and down should be mine. So I was like, I don't even want to know why you think that. Like, I don't know.
We're just going to roll with it. Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah, she was a hoot. So yeah, our friend Patricia Olson, aka Sigrid Valdis, Bob Crane divorced his wife for. After cheating on her numerous times and sticking with her, he divorced her after about like 21 years of marriage.
What a piece of shit.
Married. Yeah.
Well, and that's the other thing too, is divorce still wasn't super common then, and there wasn't really any sort of no-fault divorce. And for a woman, you still really couldn't have your own bank accounts or credit cards or anything like that in a lot of places. So she was probably, maybe didn't even want to continue on with him as her husband, but she was probably just fucking stuck.
Maybe this was a good one for her, and she was like, fine, I'm done with it.
Yeah, so he divorced her and he married Patricia Olson later that same year. Didn't wait very long.
Wow.
And they had 2 children. So Scotty and Anne Marie. Anne Marie was adopted. Scotty was not. So yeah, Bob had 5 kids total between 2 marriages. So it was quite prolific in the children part as well.
You don't say.
Wow.
I mean, and you have to think, like, he was married 21 years, got divorced, married this other woman. Like, that's, it's not young to be having 2 new kids. Like, that sounds exhausting to me. That just sounds absolutely exhausting.
But again, at the time, She became
Yeah.
stay-at-home mom, did all the chores, did all the
Mhm,
cooking, did
mhm.
all the
Or they
cleaning,
had
did all the
nannies or
child
whatever.
rearing.
Yeah.
Very
and,
true.
like,
While dad
Very
was
true.
going around doing dinner theater. So
I'm sure, to Joe's point too, like, it was probably, I wouldn't be surprised to find out they plucked a 20-year-old actress to like fill these like secretary roles, so she's not too old to be having kids, and like his hardware doesn't change, and it's I'm sure she either did the bulk of the emotional labor at home back in the like 70s, or if they were wealthy enough they had like a nanny or something like that.
Yeah. So tale as old as time. Toss the older wife over for a new 2.0 version, and
I like him a lot
started a whole
less
new
now.
family. Yeah.
I know.
Not as likable now when you see his picture, huh?
No. Now I kind of want to punch him in the face.
Yeah. So I think you're gonna want to even more after I tell you the next big relationship in his life. It was with a gentleman by the name of John Henry Carpenter. He was introduced to him by his friend that he worked with on Hogan's Heroes named Richard Dawson. I don't know if you guys know who that is, but the original Family Feud, the host of the original Family Feud, his name is Richard Dawson. So it's that guy. They met on Hogan's Heroes. They became good friends. And Richard introduced him to this guy, John Henry Carpenter. This guy, Richard knew him because this guy worked for Sony Electronics, and he was kind of known for helping famous people like set up video equipment. So, if you're rich and famous living in LA or Hollywood and you have a theater room in your home or that type of thing, this guy was like discreet, and he was known for coming in and setting all this up and showing them how to use it and all that great stuff. So he was an electronics whiz, apparently. And Richard thought that the two of them would hit it off as friends and introduce them to each other. And they did. They enjoyed each other's company for many, many years as friends. Mostly because they spent all their time together visiting bars and nightclubs, picking up women.
There it is.
Yeah.
So yes, we are on marriage number 2. We have fresh new children in the mix, and we're still a womanizer. So
yeah,
old habits die hard.
Fucking dudes, man.
Yeah. So not only did they love to pick up women together, but when you have a bestie that's fantastic with electronics, you naturally move into taking pictures and videotaping your sexual encounters with said women.
New porn was coming.
So, yeah,
I did not. That one, I should have known it was coming. I should have suspected.
You should have.
Relating to porn.
These men were ahead of their time. Let's give them credit where it is due. I mean, not a fan, but
creepily ahead of their time.
Somebody had to think of it at some point, and apparently it was these guys. So, I don't
think if you had to think about it, I think the world would be a better place if we didn't.
Yeah. He was, and he was very blatant about his proclivities, shall we say. I think by the end of his TV show, Hogan's Heroes, he would have a photo album in his trailer where he got made up of pictures of women that he would happily show people. So it was a bit off-putting if you're not into that. Yeah.
The audacity.
Yeah, I'm sure he probably had been, a star for long enough that some of these people they're out of touch and they don't realize that this is not normal behavior. You should not be flaunting this to people.
Yeah.
Because he's got no problem.
Again, not to like give excuses or anything, but again, going back to Hollywood in the earlier years that he was exposed to, that kind of was normal, we're finding out nowadays. Women were definitely over-sexualized. They were definitely sexually harassed and assaulted all the time, and it's still going on. It's like they weren't the first guys to think of doing this shit. Like, porn's been around for fucking ever, but they may have been some of the first ones to actually, like, have it there and easily accessible to tons of people. And again, easy access to a bunch of actresses that are just trying to make a name for themselves and being told, oh, you'll become famous if you let me take pictures of you naked.
Yeah.
And knowing me is a good thing around here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Bob Crane's family insists that all of these pictures and videos were consensual. However, retrospectively, some women have claimed they actually had no idea that these encounters were being videotaped, and
you don't say.
It's a surprise to them. So they could be trying to cover their own backsides, or they could legitimately have had no idea that they were being recorded.
Well, and that's such a great.
Or they could have been impaired. Like I said, they went to bars and nightclubs to pick a lot of these women up, so they could have very well been impaired at the time as well.
Yeah.
So
you don't know what you're consenting to, or
exactly.
You're
not fully aware of the discussions happening a lot of the time when you're impaired like that. Like maybe they did tell you that this was being recorded, but you didn't catch it.
Yeah.
And that's like the 5 seconds you blacked out for some reason.
Yeah. Or even, it's like still weird and pressury to like take advantage of somebody in that state.
Yeah.
It's 100% what it is. It's like, even if they're enthusiastic about the like sex part, it's like, it's kind of very different to be like, oh, and then it will be recorded forever. And like, you're not sober and we're not talking about this in advance. We're just like going on a whim. And because
I just got you to come back to my place with me and just happened to have a camcorder set up and it's not running. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, because I'm going to just take advantage of the fact that you're feeling good right now and we're about to like have some fun.
Yeah.
And
well, like, and we're talking as if it was always one-on-one, which I highly doubt. Highly doubt that
if there were two of them.
Yes, it wasn't two guys coercing and joling and all, you know what I mean? So, I'm sure there were at least a portion of those women that were horrified at finding out that this existed.
Even if they did consent to the acts, that it was photographed or recorded. Yeah.
Absolutely. So that not such a nice guy after all.
No, he sucks.
Nope. Hate his guts.
Not so great.
Fan.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. Feels very skeezy now. I take back the earlier comparisons I made of him to other people. I'd be very disappointed to find out any of them were that skeezy.
Yeah. I'm not sure that it means he deserved to get murdered, but there it is. Which leads us to the actual murder. So, you guys can go to the next picture number 3. This is our friend Bob Crane while he was...
I don't like the word friend anymore.
This dude, Bob Crane.
This is the jackass.
That is how he appeared while he was doing his play in the theater, the dinner theater here in...
Can I just say...
Scottsdale.
It's giving Jack Nicholson in The Witches of Eastwick. Where I know, Amber, either I've talked to you about this movie or I've made you watch this movie. Amy, I don't know if you have, but the premise is like, he's like a demon or the devil that comes and it's super creepy, but he does it so well, like The Shining too. Oh, so good. But that's what it's giving in this image.
Yes.
Like the fucking crinkles around his eyes. It just very much gives that feeling to it, especially with like the checkered pattern.
So he's definitely
kind of look in his eyes and the smile.
I think that you can tell he's past his prime in this picture. He definitely looks more like dinner theater material versus most popular show on TV material.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, I feel like it's very apparent that his choices have hit him pretty hard at this point in his life. He's not looking so hot. Let's just say that. He's not as dashing as he used to appear. So yeah, he was here in Scottsdale, Arizona at the dinner theater. And while he was here, for however long this play was featured at the dinner theater, which was called the Windmill Dinner Theater, he lived at a place called the Winfield Place Apartments. They're in Scottsdale, Arizona. They are actually still standing, but as condominiums now. They are now called the Winfield Place Condominiums.
That sounds familiar. I feel like I have driven past it before.
Yeah. So, I'm not sure if it's the same structure or it's just in the same location, but it is still there. You can go visit it. For Winfield Place Condominiums to this day still stand in Scottsdale, Arizona. So,
that's kind of crazy.
This is the place of our murder, which happened June 29th, 1978 in Winfield Place Apartments in Scottsdale, Arizona. He was found by a woman by the name of Victoria Ann Berry. She was his co-star at for the play that they were putting on. And he didn't show up for a meeting. It was like a lunchtime, afternoon type meeting. He never showed up, so she knew where he lived. I can only imagine why.
Mm-hmm. All of the women in the production had to draw straws to figure out who was going to figure out where he was.
Yes. So, she went to go see why he didn't show up to their meeting, and discovered his body.
Cool. That's gotta be not traumatic at all.
Yeah, not at all. And it wasn't a fun way to discover it. So it's not, murder's murder, but this particular gentleman was bludgeoned to death in his bed.
Ooh,
that's rough. Probably by a woman who found a fucking camera.
Exactly, right? Well, funny you say that because they never found the weapon, but looking back at it for trying to figure out what it could have been, they think it may have been a camera tripod.
Oh my God. The fucking irony.
So I don't need to laugh at the dead, but that is ironic right there.
I mean, yeah. There's a lot of dead people. I think we're putting ourselves in a very small box if we say we can't laugh at any of them. Because that's hilarious. And
I mean,
talk about some cosmic justice right there.
Yes,
seriously.
Yes. You can only imagine he's thinking, you've been my friend for so many years, tripod. Why?
Tripod, why? Oh no, I'd feel worse for him if he was a better person.
Yeah. So bludgeoned to death. He had 2 very large gashes above his left ear. So probably the initial impact, they were quite, bloody and gruesome. So he was obviously still alive when they happened. He also had an electrical cord tied around his neck, like to choke him.
Well, already.
So the bludgeoning wasn't enough. Somebody was really angry at him.
Really wanted him.
Really angry.
That was not even just like, oh, I'm angry. That is like, I am angry and you're dead now. Wow.
Yeah. So, not sure if it was placed after the fact, if it was part of the attack and used to kind of keep him still so he could be attacked easier. Like, not really sure of the order that it happened, but yes, both bludgeoned and choked with an electrical cord. And there was apparently blood spatter all over the wall and ceiling. Like, it was a violent attack. And there was when the police arrived there was no forced entry and nothing of value was stolen at all. So robbery was not the motive, no breaking and entering. I say nothing of value stolen because, again, they never found the murder weapon. So the theory is that is the only thing that left that apartment with the murderer is the murder weapon. So something was stolen, just not necessarily a value.
That's wild. So I don't know. I'm trying to think through theories. Are you gonna get into like theories of people who people?
I am.
Okay.
Look at you foreshadowing. I totally am.
Because I'm like, my mind's going like, could be a woman, could also be the husband of a woman who is like,
Well, see, and here's where my brain got tickled is I recognized the friend's name, John Carpenter, when you said it. I just don't know where I know it from. So, did he
I know of
do
like
it in like a weird,
the John Carpenter who did
jealousy?
the thing.
Halloween, right? John Carpenter.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I'm trying to figure out if I know his name from anything other than that too, or if it's just like a coincidence. But.
You may. So you guys can look at the next pictures. It's 2 of them.
Okay.
And that is a picture of the Winfield Place Apartments. That is his apartment that he was staying in when he was murdered. So that is where the murder occurred.
General older Arizona apartment looks
yes.
like
it
that.
looks 100% like an apartment structure from the 1970s. 100%.
Just
the
kind of
bad
flat, staccato, like
the bad stucco, the screen door, like
for some reason, like this weird wood paneling underneath the windows for no fucking reason.
Just so very much like an apartment in the 1970s in Arizona. 100%.
And then that theater looks so 1970s too. It's
and
like
then that is the dinner theater.
The orange really sets it in place.
I know, right? The orange doors and like the orange trim. It looks like a fucking like Whataburger color scheme, but
that's what I was gonna say.
A lot simpler. Wild.
So that is the Windmill Dinner Theater.
Is that still open, do you know?
It is not open as the Windmill Dinner Theater. I'm not certain if it's still open, but the last known business to be in that location was called Buzz Nightclub or something like that. It was actually, one of those nightclubs that's actually 18 and older. So they do serve alcohol, but you can also get in the doors if you're under 21, and it was for dancing. It was a dance club, essentially. For the teenagers here in Scottsdale. So I as recently as the 2000s at least, it existed as Buzz Nightclub. So there you have it.
Interesting.
Google Maps it. You can check it out. It is quite ugly, I'm going to tell you. The condominiums do look nicer that have replaced the apartment. So I'm guessing that they probably took them down and rebuilt something because they look much nicer now. If you look up the Winfield condominiums, very different look than what you're seeing there in that picture of the apartment. So, but for the investigation, we were hindered from the beginning, mostly because Scottsdale did not even have a homicide division at this point in time.
That's hilarious. Didn't exist. Did they just think they're above that? They're like, oh,
probably, yeah.
Scottsdale, Arizona.
I mean, I have had to drive through Scottsdale so many fucking times because my ex and his mom and the family like lived out there for years. I just had to drive through there for so many times. It was very, very rare that I ever saw like an actual police station or a fire station even. Like they're tucked away and hidden. They really want it to be like a luxury city. So you don't realize that they even truly exist out there sometimes.
They're above fire and crime.
How could anything bad ever happen to us?
Yeah.
But so isn't this like the second murderer we've talked about from Scottsdale?
So they just were completely unprepared. And of course, not having a homicide division means you don't know how to handle a crime scene that is from a homicide. So it was like a very open crime scene. People were coming and going. They were tracking things through there. It was not locked down. It was not well done. They were completely unprepared for something like this in
And,
our
like,
little
granted,
town of Scottsdale.
it was the 70s, but even so, there have been some cases where they still took like DNA evidence in the 70s, knowing that it was possible to run in the future someday.
They didn't know.
So there was knowledge, just they didn't have the correct training to handle it. And also, probably because it's a famous person's place, people wanted to like that shock factor of, oh my gosh,
I want to go.
What happened here?
Yeah.
I want to sightsee. Yeah. That's happened with quite a few like older.
I was just saying that there's like nothing more frustrating than that mentality of like, oh, because it was really popular, especially like the 40s through the 50s for some fucking reason. You'd think we'd be past that in the 70s.
Yeah.
Like that, like, oh, I want to see a crime scene in person. Like,
Yeah.
Wow.
Especially
a crime scene.
Yeah.
Anything that's currently active or anything that involved like possible famous people, and particularly in like prominent areas is where it happened a lot. Like Hollywood, it was a huge deal. People would come in and reporters would come in and trample all over crime scenes.
Sure. Yeah. So also like a cornerstone of that is like the more gruesome or ghastly.
Oh yeah.
The better, because people have this mentality of like, I will literally never see this again in my lifetime. What is this? I have to find out. So yeah, I just think
it's so funny too, because people complain nowadays a lot about like, there's too many true crime podcasts and true crime shows and true crime everywhere. And we don't want to see all that death and gore and destruction. It's like, it's been around forever and people have always gravitated towards it. Always.
Even before that, you had people like doing picnics and kind of like
people are fucking nosy and they want to know what's going on. Yeah.
Same. Me too. Like I love that shit.
But the difference here is that at least now you kind of analyze the behind the scenes stuff, the mentality of it. It's not just about the blood and the gore and the like that. Like you try to get to know who they were aside from that one moment in time that they're now infamous for. So so yeah, lots of people tramping in and out, not an ideal crime scene. And like Joe, I think, mentioned already, no DNA testing at the time. 1978, DNA testing is not a thing. It's already, the best they could do is blood typing at that point. And if you had a common blood type, didn't really help. They could say it's human blood, but that's kind of all they could do back then.
Yeah, and if you have that much of like a gore scene too, there's too many places to take samples from. It'd be very easy to miss someone's differing blood type.
Exactly. I mean, you can only imagine there is a chance you have some admix going on of like the person who attacked got hurt as well. And gosh, that's a hard thing to decipher nowadays, let alone in 1978 when they had zero capabilities of doing that. So not an ideal crime scene. Let's just say that. The one thing that they did find that was somewhat helpful in the investigation is this incredibly extensive video collection that nobody besides Bob Crane and his friend John, whatever his name is, John Carpenter, he kept all the video, and they traveled with him apparently as he did his dinner theater. Like they were like his little traveling friends. I don't know. He had them with the entire collection with him in his apartment when he was murdered.
That's so creepy. So yeah, it's like on top of being murdered, now you're like your weird porn addiction just comes spilling out for everyone to see.
100%. Like it's not bad enough that that's like what you're known for is being murdered, but then on top of it, you're a pervert and you're murdered, right? So like, yeah, that is, I think 100% what he is known for nowadays, even more so than that show that he became famous on, which is probably very unfortunate for the children who have come behind him and bear his name. And, you know, that's not really a great thing to be associated with. Let's just say that.
No, but Also, don't make excuses for them. If they were fucking perverts and assholes.
Yeah, not for him.
Yeah.
Not for him. I just feel bad for the kid. Like, the kid who's literally got the name Bob Crane was named after him, you know?
Yeah.
Like, how unfortunate.
Although, how common is the name Bob Crane? Let's just be real
true.
here.
That's true. I mean, I might go your route and just rename myself Ichabod. Be like, I'll embrace this
Or
one.
just, like,
I'll be Ichabod Crane now.
He's got a mom. He's got another last name potential. He can be Robert.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. So this leads us to our suspects, ladies. Suspects. We have 2.
Okay.
You guys want to make any other guesses before I start getting into them, or still leaning on a woman or her husband?
A woman or her husband or his friend. That's the other one that's in my mind, is like some kind of fallout with his friend. I don't know how to fight.
I want the porn collection tonight. No, you can't. You never let me have it. Don't.
Oh God, what have I done?
I love it.
Commit to this really hard.
I love it. So I'm sure that there were more, but 2 suspects were very strongly considered for this murder. Suspect number 1 is his friend, John Henry Carpenter. Right off the bat, as soon as those videos were discovered, he became a person of interest. And he happened to be in Scottsdale at the time. He didn't live there. He left Sony and worked for another company. I forget the name of it. Apologies. I looked it up and I completely forgot it. But he was kind of high up enough in that company that he arranged his work schedule so he could travel with Bob to these dinner theaters as he put on shows, so they could continue their fun of picking up women and videotaping them while they have sex with them. And just kept
that's
the
not a
time
red flag.
going. Yeah.
Cool.
So he literally arranged his work travel schedule to like go around the country with Bob Crane.
So skeezy. That's so bad.
Yeah.
I don't like that.
Yeah. So he was 100% in Scottsdale at the time of the murder. And coincidentally, Bob had made statements to people that he was finished with Carpenter. He was done living that lifestyle. He needed to let it go. He realized he was a sex addict. He didn't want to be like this anymore. It was time to cut ties. And there are even accounts of them fighting or having a confrontation at a Scottsdale club the night of the murder.
Not looking good, Johnny.
Not looking good for a friend, John Carpenter. Even worse, he rented a car while he was in Scottsdale, and they did find blood in it and smeared on the door, on the interior of the car. And it did match Crane's blood type. As I said, that was all that they could really decipher back then was blood type. And it did match Bob Crane's blood type. So he's looking pretty good as a suspect.
Open shut case of something?
I mean,
right?
Oh, man.
Yeah, so really, really not looking good for John Henry Carpenter.
No,
Yeah. However, there was a second suspect.
Okay.
And that suspect is Patricia Olson, his wife at the time.
I mean,
okay.
Not a bad
they
suspect.
were in the middle of a divorce. Part of Bob Crane's epiphany was that he was in a miserable marriage. He obviously never loved her. If he could cheat on her this much, it was time to get a divorce and start over. And they were in the middle of a divorce, and she could potentially lose everything. Her comfortable life, her comfortable home. It was all in danger because they were getting a divorce.
He'd still have to pay her alimony, though. I mean, he's kind of washed up now, so how much are you going to get? But
yeah. But, and, I mean, if we're really talking about back then, the time, like, did men really pay that much in alimony? And if they were supposed to, did anybody really come after them if they didn't?
Yeah,
I guess that's fair.
worst.
And he's really not built a reputation as a good guy who's going to do the right thing. So
True.
I can see it.
Good points. Yeah.
What, however, makes it look even worse for her was after he died and he was buried, she had his body moved from its original resting place to a completely different location, different cemetery, without telling his first family. So his children had no idea where to come see him. Like, she just up and took the body and left town with it, essentially.
What the fuck?
He was reinterred somewhere in LA.
Okay.
And then her son that she had with him, the two of them, after the murder, started a memorial website for Bob Crane where you could go on there and buy his homemade pornography.
No.
So.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Girl.
Yeah. That's fucked.
Yeah.
What in the actual fuck?
Yeah. So,
yeah, let's sell this, like, porn
very
by unconsenting women.
With a dead man. With, like,
I 100% want, like, my husband to be memorialized forever by this creepy porn that he shot that I was unaware of.
Like, the change.
Like, what the fuck?
The change in his burial place, I could understand if you move it to LA because he was a
Closer to
quote
home,
unquote
whatever.
star. And yes, doing it without the first family's knowledge because she probably wasn't super close with them and probably didn't talk to them, or thought the first wife was a bitch because isn't that always how it goes? The first wife is the worst.
It's always the wife, yeah.
You brainwash the second wife into believing that it's all her fault and it's not the guy's fault, and that's how you get her to marry you. But like, adding on the selling of the porn of
That's
young
gross.
women throughout the decades. Like, especially including your son in doing that shit.
Exactly. That's his son. Yeah. So
That's so gross.
very so the website is no longer, it has been taken down. The son has come out and said, I regret ever doing it. I'm sure because
As
of the
you
backlash
should.
more than anything.
Well, I wonder how old the son
yeah.
was at that time. Like, I'm not gonna.
True, yeah.
I'm not gonna blame him too much when you're.
If he wasn't
like,
super old,
especially
yeah, maybe
if
mom
your
coerced him
mom
into it.
is pressuring you to be like, no, we're gonna do this. Your dad left us with no money. Like, we have to do this. Like, yeah, I blame her 1,000 times more than I blame him, depending on age. If the son's like 30 at this time, I'm like, dude, you're fucking weird too.
Even if he's in like his early 20s, I would still place more blame on him. If he was like in his teens, just coming up to 20, less blame on him.
Well, yeah. We'll talk about blame.
Yeah.
So weird.
Yeah.
I
will say,
weirdo though. Like,
right?
I know.
The first wife is
fucking
the only
Hollywood. Fucking Hollywood and actors. That's all I'm going to say.
I guess.
I am going to pin it on that because I'm sure things like this happen every day in people's lives that we just don't know about. But man, there's got to be something about being an actor in Hollywood that just makes you warped
there. Absolutely.
Yeah. Just warped.
Yeah.
So yeah, one very strong suspect, one incredibly probable suspect. Let's just say that. However, because there was no, testing of DNA, there was not a whole lot else to go on. They didn't move forward with any arrests. They were not confident that they had enough
even with
to
blood
take anybody
on that
to trial.
Car door, that's crazy.
Yeah. So
that's crazy.
For many, many, many years, nothing happened in this murder. Nothing at all. Until about 10 years ago, actually. So it's sat dormant for many, about 40 years, where nobody was charged.
DNA testing.
And then our friend that I mentioned earlier, who is a friend this time, John Hook, a local news anchor from Phoenix, Arizona, got interested in the case, got them to agree to let him find outside DNA testing, get some of this stuff tested, figure out like what we actually have as far as evidence. And they did. They let him do it. They let him
That's
like
crazy.
organize it all, and he wanted to write a book about it. So he got the blood evidence analyzed from John Carpenter's car. Interestingly, the DNA indicated 2 completely separate profiles. So we have an admixture of DNA on here, and neither one of them matched Bob Crane.
What?
Now I'm actually more concerned because
what?
Right? I'm like, did he run over some homeless person in Scottsdale? Like, what happened? How did this blood get on his car? Because it did not. It definitively did not match Bob Crane's DNA.
Oh my god.
Oh my god. What the actual fuck, Amy?
It was his blood type, but not his blood.
It was 2 other people's blood.
And just 2 other people's blood.
That's one of the things that I'm going to pause from this whole story and just ask you to think about is match his blood type. So they were positive they were in the right direction, but it was definitively not his blood. So think in your head about how many people in the history of our country have been convicted of murders on nothing
for much
but
less.
This blood type matched.
That's crazy.
I mean, that's astounding to me. That's that's astounding to me.
Well, and in some cases, just the blood type matching from something, but no other, not even like being friends with the person. Yeah.
No.
Nothing.
No. And sometimes they'd have alibis, but the blood type matched. You have to be the killer. So, yeah, just horrifying to think about. Like, how many people are in jail or have been put to death because of very, very bad evidence, I'm going to call it, even though it's really not.
That still happens today, which is why the Innocence Project and other projects like it are super important. And if you don't know anything about that, the Wine and Crime Gals did an episode on it, and they actually interviewed the author of a book about the project, who actually, I think he started the project too. They interviewed him in one of their episodes. Yeah. It's really awesome. It's a
fantastic project. Yeah, I am we'll have so fully behind them,
because that is a good shout out, because that is wild to think too. It's like how easy this would have been, like if they, because I was thinking earlier too, like if they had I was surprised they didn't try to take this to trial, because like I feel like a jury, you have a pretty at least 50-50 shot to see if they would convict on that alone. So,
and that I think that does kind of go back into Scottsdale not having a homicide department at the time. Those cops probably did feel overwhelmed, and like just the basic bare logic that they still had in their brains of, well, blood type really shouldn't be enough to arrest somebody on. They probably they, again, speculating, but they may have just had that still in their brains of not being indoctrinated in that sort of police training that sometimes happens, where it's very specifically like, this is your evidence. Especially back then, if all you had was blood typing and any sort of like DNA related, like bodily fluid related testing was probably drilled into people's brains that were on the force of, this is matter of fact, cannot be beat, other than the fact that it could be somebody else's blood. But if you have anything else tying them together, then absolutely that would point to, yes, they were the killer. Like that was probably stuck in their brains because that's all they had at the time. But the Scottsdale Police Department not having a homicide division, not trained specifically that way, maybe that was why they didn't arrest anybody.
Just like, oh yeah, we just don't, like we don't know what that
if
means.
It's 2 different people's blood on the door and not Crane's, then it's probably a good thing they didn't arrest him.
100%,
I mean, yes and no. Good thing they didn't arrest him for a crime he didn't do, but he was still a fucking asshole.
Yeah.
So
also, there it seems like there are other crimes he probably did do, so we should look into those.
Yeah. So you guys can flip to the last 2 pictures. They were, and I'm not sure if, of all the reading I did, it wasn't clear if the DNA work was done before or after, but they did actually end up bringing him to trial. They still believed that John Carpenter was their guy after all was said and done. Many, many years later, they brought him to trial. And so there you have a picture of both of our suspects. The first one is John Henry Carpenter. The second one is Patricia Olson, both at the trial for Bob Crane's death. However, Carpenter was acquitted after 3 days. So no, actually, now that I think about it, this was after the DNA evidence was analyzed. So he was acquitted. The jury felt that this is not his blood. Like, why are we even here? That we can't.
Yeah.
They deliberated for 3 days, and they couldn't.
Perfect timing for him.
Yeah. Which, to your point, makes you think if they had brought him in originally and all they had was the blood typing,
he probably would have gone to jail.
He would have been in jail for those 40 years instead of free. And I mean, maybe he did kill him and he killed somebody else, and that's who knows? Who can say?
Yeah.
But it's definitely not Bob Crane's blood on the car. There were some crime scene photos where they clearly saw a piece of, they're calling it brain matter in the car. However, it is nowhere to be found in any evidence lockers anywhere. So they don't know if it was just ignored, if it was lost over time, like what happened. But it can never be tested because they don't have any idea what happened to it. So,
which would have been so much better than some blood smears.
Yes.
Yeah, especially because too, like, you picture the only thing he's missing is this tripod murder weapon. That's got to be, this guy would know how to sat down, throws in the back of his car. There's a little bit of, something falls on the car floor, like. Yeah,
and then the DNA of 2 other people is just he went on a killing spree that night, which does happen.
It's just like, why not? Why not?
People show no signs and then just like snap and go on killing sprees randomly, and
like,
then after like 24 to 48 hours are done. Like, it could have happened.
He's all hopped up on adrenaline. He's like, this wasn't so bad. I'm just going to keep it going. And then he's like, oh crap, that was really bad. I don't know why I did that. So who knows? But yeah, he was acquitted. And the murder remains unsolved. So this is my first one I'm presenting to you guys that does not have a definitive conclusion. It is still considered an unsolved murder.
That's crazy.
And people still like talk about it to this day and try to solve it. I think for a very long time, people just thought John Henry Carpenter got away with murder. And he was up against this inept police force that just couldn't get their shit together. But he was legitimately acquitted of the crime. And now everybody is like, what really happened to Bob Crane?
I don't know. I'm still leaning on John H. Carpenter versus inept police force, because like, if you have potential like brain matter in a car and it's just like, we're just like, what brain matter? We don't have anything to test. Like,
whatever happened to that, I wonder. Like, and I mean, it clearly seen in pictures of the crime scene. And so like,
he might not have killed, Bob Crane, but he did something to somebody.
He did something.
Something for sure.
Something bad happened. Yeah, for sure.
So,
they should have been looking at other unsolved Scottsdale murders around that time frame, if that's the case, because
I'm going to go out again on a limb and speculate here that it was probably prostitutes or women who were thought to do sex work at the time, even if they didn't, because any single woman out at bars that was like prolifically popular with men obviously was a sex worker. Again, nothing against sex work, but people are fucking assholes about that shit. Like, that could have been it. You probably didn't look into it because, fuck women and fuck sex workers.
Yeah, so unsolved to this day. So
that's wild.
That's an interesting one.
See, I normally will say, like, I appreciate an unsolved mystery just because, like, I like, you know, I like a mystery. It gets the, like, gears turning in my head. But this one is frustrating, I think, because
Yes.
there's very clearly there was more evidence. Like, I feel like this one should have been solved.
Yeah.
And they just fucked it so bad that, like, they threw any chance of solving it out the window. Like, any chance of it.
Yeah, so like the horrible treatment of the crime scene 100% hurt this case. So like when DNA analysis finally came along, there was very little hope. Like all you could test was the blood that was on that car. You couldn't go back and test the crime scene because it was just so contaminated at that point.
Yeah, because anyone was allowed to walk through it. Like it wouldn't matter.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so frustrating.
Yeah, and even to the point of like fingerprints and shoe prints and all those other things that you can kind of layer forensically together to get a picture, they shot themselves in the foot. Like it was gone. So yeah, it will probably never be solved because of that. So shout out to Scottsdale Police, yay! Yeah, very unfortunate. I mean, again, not the most stand-up guy, but you know, his children probably deserve some answers that they'll probably never get. So, that's kind of the unfortunate side effect of it all.
Yeah. Yeah, not a cool guy, still not, you know. Yeah. And not,
I don't know.
Cold-blooded murder is never okay. Like, there is still that chance, like, part of, you know, there's that thing in the back of your head where it's like, was it, like, someone he had brought home that night? And it was like, it started as maybe defense or hysteria to, like, fight back or something like that. And in that case, it's like, well, I think you're right. I think even in cases like this, at the very least, like, there are people out there connected to him, like, that deserve answers. You know, like, his kids were innocent.
Yeah.
Like, his kids didn't do any of that. His family members, like, were innocent. Like, they could benefit from some kind of closure. Like, them having a bad parent doesn't make them undeserving of closure in some capacity. But, like, yeah, it's really hard to say. Like, I mean, not to say that anybody deserves to die, but, like, it's really hard to say, like, in that moment, like, was it a cold-blooded kind of case, or was it like something that escalated? And it's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
We'll never know.
And that's the other thing too, is if they think the tripod was the murder weapon potentially, if he was theoretically stopping those ways, why was the tripod even out? You know, where if it was just a random person, they could have grabbed it and used it, but why would it have been out? It definitely makes much more sense for John Carpenter to have been the murderer if he was like picking up equipment that he paid for and he didn't want Crane to have anymore because, well, I paid for it and you're pissing me off and I want it back, and they just explode and he kills him with it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it doesn't really make sense as to why it would have been out and available for someone to just grab and murder him with.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, this is, you know, secondhand accounts of him saying, well, he was done with this life. But is that looking back with rose-colored glasses, or
who knows?
It like every other addict that says, no, I'm better now, I'm done with this, but backslide? Like, there are just so many potential scenarios here that
tomorrow, I promise.
Yes. So, just we'll probably never know, ladies, who killed Bob Crane, but there it is.
I'm kind of okay with that.
So I'm just, and this is going to show what a horrible person I am, but in my mind, best case scenario is it's some prostitute that realized that he was going too far and was not appreciative of it and fought back, or her pimp fought back, or, you know what I mean? Like, at least that's a level of justice that came out of it. Like, in my mind, that's the best case scenario.
Yeah, where it's somebody who was like, that's what I thought too, is like the only like, because it's hard to defend it one way or the other, especially without knowing the whole situation. But like, if it's somebody who was like a victim of his, it to some degree, fighting back, and then they didn't want this in the first place, so then they slip out and get to live a quiet life after. There is some like as morbid
some
as
poetic
that sounds,
justice. Yeah,
I think there is almost some poeticism to that. It's still fucked, like, don't get me wrong. But you never know. Yeah, the worst case scenario is somebody like went and like planned it and like did all this and like just got away with it. But
so yeah. Parting thoughts? You guys, you gonna go check out these old seedier spots in Scottsdale and see where this all went down, or
and
are you good living vicariously?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good with all that. Like, I don't think like there was.
You have to have a reason to go to Scottsdale. You don't just go to Scottsdale on a whim,
Yeah,
and I doubt we can actually like go and walk around these condominiums these days. So
no, I don't. Yeah, think I want to.
I'm sure.
No,
I'm quite sure they're probably like, oh God, these people again.
I know, right? No,
leave it alone already.
I'm more than happy just kind of putting this one to rest in my mind after this. Like, we're never gonna get closure on it, kind of like you said. Like, there's so little evidence, and I think like all these places are kind of older. That nightclub, I know you said like is potentially not even open anymore. Like, last year it was like in the 2000s, so it's like it's kind of just like it feels like it's in its own little time capsule, and it's a mystery.
Yeah,
just stay that way forever.
Yep, absolutely. Like, this is just some weird little blip that happened, and we're gonna leave it there.
Yeah.
All right. So once again, I'm Amy.
I'm Amber.
And I'm Joe.
And this has been Murderous, Mysterious, and Macabre. If you like this episode, please leave a rating and review and consider sharing our podcast with your friends. If you're watching us on YouTube, don't forget to like our video and subscribe to our channel. And if you like what we do, please consider joining our Patreon found in the link below. Bye.
Bye.